The Big Ten is filled with big games this season, but what are the underrated games that need to also be considered? I have a few ideas. However, I want to hear from Jeff first. So, Jeff, I don't want you to pick Ohio State, Penn State. I don't want you to pick, Penn State, Oregon, anything like that. What are some underrated games? We went through and saw a couple of them. We went game by game through our schedule prediction last episode or 2 episodes ago. What's an underrated game for you coming up this season in 2025?
So just the way I looked at it is that it would be a mid-tier team, and the outcome of a particular game would dictate whether they get to the 6 wins and make a bowl game. So I looked at all my 5 and 7 predicted teams, which were Wisconsin, UCLA, Michigan State, and Rutgers, and then looked at games that they lost, that I predicted they lost, that maybe they could win. And the winner actually turned out to be Wisconsin at Minnesota for me in the last week of the season. The week before that, Illinois comes in to Camp Randall, and that game you can't say it's underrated, because for Illinois it could mean make the playoffs or not, and for Wisconsin they would love to ruin Bielema's season with Illinois, right? And Illinois is a rival. But if they lose that game, I really think Wisconsin will go in that next week needing to beat Minnesota to get the 6 wins. That's important for Fickel. I don't think he's going to get fired even if he doesn't, but I think being in a bowl, you get more practice time, right? More practice reps. It's a better story for recruits, and I think that's a big game for Wisconsin to build momentum, and that's why I'm calling that an underrated game for me.
And more people need to know about the Axe Trophy. Like, it's the coolest trophy.
I mean, I definitely think it will be a game that people recognize in the Big Ten because of the implications of the rivalry and everything like that. However, you're right, Jeff, with all the talk this season about Wisconsin, is Luke Fickel going to be fired or not, stuff like that. Illinois is going to have the spice because it could be a possible playoff entry game or not. But the Minnesota-Wisconsin one, that's one that more Big Ten fans and people who pay attention to this conference will need to make sure they're on top of, because it really could impact, A, things with Luke Fickel, and B, just the direction of the program overall. And also Minnesota too. That could be a game that could elevate Minnesota to possibly 8-9 wins. And if they get there, that's a huge season for Minnesota.
Yeah, much better bowls could be at risk for them too.
Yeah. Lots of good storylines there. That's a good one, Jeff.
Zach, what do you got?
So I went a little different. I was thinking about games that are a little under the radar, but could be an upset for a team that maybe is a bigger team that could prop the other team either into playoff contention or into a better national spotlight. So I've got 2. One is Oregon at Iowa in week 11. Like, Oregon's coming off a bye. I think people would expect Oregon to beat Iowa, but Iowa's also coming off a bye, and it's in Kinnick. And so if it's at night, especially, I could see where that could knock Oregon out of playoff contention, or it could propel Iowa to a much better season and maybe playoff consideration at the end. The other one, and Jeff, you have this, you picked this as an upset, Ohio State at Washington. The big game that week is Penn State, Oregon. But like I think it's going to be the 3:30 CBS game. Ohio State at Washington, I think, is an underrated game. A lot of people will have Ohio State at Illinois circled in that 4-game stretch. But that Washington game, I think, is going to be really tricky for the Buckeyes too. And so I think I have that circled as one of my underrated games.
Yeah, I think that's good stuff. The Oregon at Iowa one, I do think that's probably one that'll get a little bit more juice as it comes up, but it's not really one that's being seen as that right now. And it's also coming off that Penn State Ohio State game the week before it, and that's obviously the one that's going to get a lot of the recognition before that one. So good picks there, Zach. I'm going to go. So I thought about USC Michigan, as Max pointed out there. I feel like that's one that's going to get a lot of hype going into it with Michigan and USC. I think both of those teams could have good records by that time. One, maybe two losses, but not, maybe both teams undefeated too. We'll see. But I think that's going to be one that's really interesting, especially with how things ended last year, right? Can USC avenge what happened with their defense, with Kalel Mullings kind of breaking off the big run there and then being able to get the win late in the game? That's going to be a game that means a lot for USC. So I think that one's a little bit too hyped up. And then Philip says here, Rutgers versus Minnesota. You're right. Kirk Shiraka. I mean, the storylines with the coaches, Athan Kalakmanis. That's a really good one.
Very good one
to think about there.
And bowl implications for Rutgers there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good thought. I think the one that not enough people are paying attention to right now, and it's because I think it's being overshadowed by that Indiana-Illinois game, is Indiana at Iowa, and then also Illinois USC. I think those two games there in Week 5, they're going to be overshadowed because you have Ohio State at Washington, you have you have what's the other one? Oh, no, Wisconsin, Michigan's the week later. I apologize. But I think those two games are going to get overshadowed by Ohio State, Washington, and I think those are going to be important ones too, especially for whichever team loses that game between Indiana and Illinois, because that's going to be a must-win game if you want to vie for the playoffs after that. And it's also going to be a must-win game for USC and for Iowa, because those are going to be, possibly their biggest test of the season so far. So really important games there.
Good stuff, JR. That's good.
Any other thoughts on underrated games before we move on, guys?
A lot of candidates, man.
There are.
Yep.
There are.